It was January 23rd, 2026 at 2:47 a.m. when a dream so violent, so consuming, drove me from my bed and sent me racing through the darkness to the mountaintop overlooked 30 miles outside the city, and there, surrounded by the vast expanse of pre-dawn sky where stars still burned with ancient fire and the wind carried the scent of pine and distant rain, Jesus stood at the cliff's edge that I had been standing at only moments before, his silhouette framed against the faint purple glow gathering at the horizon, and he turned to me with eyes that held both infinite compassion and terrible urgency, and said, "Jonathan, they're running out of time, and most of them don't even know they need to run. I'm about to show you 5 places, 5 physical locations on this earth, where my remnant will find safety when February's tribulation begins. Not everyone who sees this message is meant to see it. Some will scroll past, some will ignore it. But you've been marked. I'm telling you right now, if you're watching this, if you've made it this far into this message, you didn't arrive here by accident. You were led here, drawn here, called here. Before I go any further, I need you to do something. I need you to leave your prayer requests in the comments below. I don't care how impossible your situation seems. I don't care how long you've been waiting. Leave it there. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just information, it's activation. And your act of faith in typing out that prayer request is the first step in positioning yourself for what's coming. And listen, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, I need you to understand something. This isn't about numbers for me. This is about gathering the remnant. This is about making sure that those who have ears to hear are actually connected when the critical messages come through. YouTube's algorithm is already suppressing this content. I've watched it happen in real time. Videos that should reach millions are being shown to thousands. So when you subscribe and hit that notification bell, you're not just supporting a channel, you're ensuring you're in the room when God speaks the words that might save your life. Some of you know me from The Chosen. You've watched me portray Jesus across 4 seasons, and I'm humbled by that. But I need you to understand something crucial. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a pastor. I'm not someone who claims to have all the answers. I'm just a broken man who said yes to playing the role of Jesus in a television series. And somewhere in that process, the real Jesus began showing up in ways I never expected, in ways that terrified me, in ways that ruined me for ordinary faith. What I'm about to share with you happened over 3 consecutive nights, 3 encounters that have left me changed, shaken, and absolutely convinced that we are standing at the edge of something that will separate those who truly know him from those who only know about him. Let me take you back to that mountaintop. The temperature was dropping. I could feel it even through my jacket. I'd thrown on jeans, boots, and grabbed the first coat I could find before running to my truck. The drive up the mountain road had been treacherous, winding through darkness so complete that my headlights seemed to be swallowed by it. I didn't know why I was going there. I just knew I had to. The dream had been simple but overwhelming. Jesus standing at a cliff's edge, beckoning me, not speaking, just beckoning. And in the dream, I knew that if I didn't go immediately, I would miss something I was meant to hear. When I reached the overlook parking area, I killed the engine and sat in the sudden silence. My breath was coming fast, fogging the windshield. My hands were shaking. I remember gripping the steering wheel and whispering, "Jesus, if this is you, I'm here. If this is just my mind playing tricks, please. I can't handle another false alarm." I stepped out into air so cold it burned my lungs. The wind was steady, not gusting, just a constant presence that seemed to carry whispers I couldn't quite make out. Above me the stars were so bright, so numerous that the Milky Way looked like a river of light splitting the sky in half. The overlook itself was a rocky promontory that jutted out from the mountain, with a metal railing installed years ago to keep tourists from getting too close to the edge. Beyond that railing was a drop of at least 300 feet into a valley still wrapped in darkness. In daylight you could see for miles, forests, distant peaks, the silver thread of a river. But at 2:47 in the morning, there was only the abyss and the stars and the wind. I walked toward the railing, my boots crunching on gravel and patches of frost. And that's when I saw him. He was standing beyond the railing, right at the cliff's edge, in a place where no human should be able to stand. Not floating, not glowing, just standing there as if the laws of physics bent around him out of courtesy. He was wearing simple clothes, a dark robe that moved in the wind, and when he turned to look at me, I felt the same thing I'd felt 100 times while filming The Chosen, except multiplied by 1,000. That sense of being completely known, completely seen, every secret, every failure, every hidden thing exposed in a single glance, and yet somehow not condemned. Not yet. Jonathan. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried over the wind as if the wind itself paused to let him speak. Come closer. I gripped the railing. Lord, I can't. The edge. You've been standing at edges your whole life, he said, and there was something in his tone. Not quite sadness, not quite frustration, disappointment maybe. Always close enough to see, but never close enough to fall. Never close enough to need me to catch you. I don't know how to explain what happened next. I didn't climb over the railing. I didn't jump. But suddenly I was standing beside him, on that impossible ledge, with nothing but air and darkness below us and the stars wheeling overhead. My legs should have been shaking. I should have been terrified. But standing next to him, I felt anchored, solid, more real than I'd felt in months. Do you know what month this is? He asked, looking out over the darkness. January, I said, January 23rd. And do you know what's coming in February? I hesitated. Lord, people have been predicting tribulations and judgments for 2,000 years. Every generation thinks they're the last one. He turned to face me fully, and his eyes, I can't describe them adequately. They were dark and deep and filled with something that looked like barely contained grief. Jonathan, I'm not talking about predictions. I'm not talking about interpretations of prophecy or someone's best guess about timelines. I'm talking about what I know is coming, what has already been set in motion, what cannot be stopped, only survived. The wind picked up suddenly, and I heard it then. That sound I'd thought was just wind earlier. It was voices, thousands of them, millions, crying out, screaming, praying, cursing, all blending together into a sound like the ocean, like static, like the world itself groaning. Do you hear them? Jesus asked. Yes. What is that? That's February, he said quietly. That's the sound of my church, or what calls itself my church, when the tribulation begins, when the safety they thought they had evaporates, when the prosperity they were promised turns to ash, when the buildings they trusted in become tombs. He raised his hand, and the darkness below us suddenly lit up, not with sunlight, with fire. I could see cities burning. I could see crowds of people running through streets, panicked, desperate. I could see churches, massive mega churches with their stadium seating and concert lighting, empty and dark, their doors chained shut. Lord, what is this? This is what happens when people build their faith on sand, he said, when they choose comfort over consecration, when they want my blessings but not my presence, when they love the idea of me but refuse to actually know me. The vision shifted. Now I was seeing something else. 5 locations, shown to me like points of light in the darkness. I couldn't make out details yet, but I could feel them. One was near water. One was in mountains. One was in a place that felt ancient, desert-like. The others were less clear, but they pulsed with a sense of safety, of refuge. 5 places, Jesus said. 5 physical locations where I'm preparing shelter for my remnant. Not for everyone who calls themselves Christian. Not for everyone who goes to church on Sunday or posts Bible verses on social media. For those who actually know my voice. For those who will drop everything and run when I say run. Why are you showing me this? I asked. My voice was shaking now. Why me? He looked at me with such intensity that I felt it in my chest, like a physical pressure. Because you have a platform. Because people listen to you. Because you've portrayed me on screen. And now I'm asking you to represent me in reality. To warn them. To prepare them. To separate the wheat from the chaff before the winnowing begins. But Lord, they'll think I'm crazy. They'll say I'm fear-mongering or trying to start a cult or— Let them say it, he interrupted, and there was steel in his voice now. Let them mock. Let them dismiss. Let them scroll past. The ones who are mine will recognize my voice. The ones who are marked will respond. The rest— He paused, and the grief in his eyes deepened. The rest will learn the hard way that knowing about me and knowing me are not the same thing. The vision below us intensified. I saw families torn apart. I saw believers, people I recognized, people I'd met at conferences and events, weeping because they'd waited too long, because they'd ignored the warnings, because they'd been too comfortable to move when movement was still possible. February, Jesus said again. It begins in February, and most of them have no idea. They're planning their vacations, they're focused on their careers, they're arguing about politics and theology and who's right about end times doctrine, and they're going to be caught completely unprepared. What do I tell them? I asked desperately. What do they need to do? Tomorrow night, he said. Come back tomorrow night. I'll show you the first location. But tonight, you need to deliver the warning. You need to tell them that time is shorter than they think, that the safety they're trusting in is an illusion, that I'm offering a way of escape, but only for those who are willing to actually follow me, not just follow their idea of me. The wind suddenly roared, and I staggered backward. When I caught my balance, I was standing behind the railing again, alone on the overlook. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, not sunrise yet, but that deep blue that comes before dawn. I stood there shaking, not from cold, but from the weight of what I'd just experienced. My phone said it was 4:23 a.m. I'd been on that mountain for over an hour and a half, though it had felt like minutes. As I walked back to my truck, I noticed something I hadn't seen in the darkness: frost on the ground in the shape of words. I had to kneel down and use my phone's flashlight to read them, and even then, I wasn't sure if I was seeing correctly or if my mind was playing tricks. But the words were clear. 5 places, February, don't wait. By the time I stood up, the frost was already melting in the approaching dawn. I'm recording this message now, just hours after that encounter, because I can't wait. I can't sit on this. I can't worry about what people will think or whether this will hurt my career or whether I'll be labeled as extreme. If you're watching this, you need to understand something. This isn't a metaphor. This isn't symbolic. Jesus didn't show me spiritual locations or heavenly refuges. He showed me 5 actual places on this earth where he's preparing physical safety for those who will need it when February's tribulation begins. I don't know all the details yet. I don't know exactly what form this tribulation will take, but I know it's coming. I know it's soon. And I know that most of the church is completely unprepared. So here's what I need you to do right now. First, leave your prayer request in the comments. Do it now. Don't wait until the end of the video. This is your act of faith, your declaration that you're taking this seriously. Second, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. I'll be sharing more over the next 3 nights as Jesus reveals each location to me. If you're not subscribed, you might miss the information that could save your life. Third, and this is crucial, start asking Jesus right now if you're meant to be in one of these 5 places. Not everyone is. Some of you are called to stay where you are and be light in the darkness. But some of you, and you'll know who you are meant to move, to relocate, to position yourselves in these places of refuge before February arrives. I know this sounds extreme. I know this sounds like the kind of thing that gets dismissed as religious hysteria. But I'm telling you, I've never been more sober, more clear-headed, more certain of anything in my life. Tomorrow night, I'm going back to that mountain. Jesus told me he'll show me the first location, and I'll share it with you immediately. But tonight, I need you to sit with this warning. I need you to let it sink in. I need you to ask yourself honestly, if Jesus appeared to you right now and told you to drop everything and move to a place of safety, would you do it? Or would you hesitate? Would you make excuses? Would you wait until it was too late? The wind is still blowing outside my window as I record this, and I swear I can still hear those voices, millions of them, crying out in February's tribulation. Some of them are people who will watch this video and ignore it. Some of them are people who will laugh at this message and share it mockingly with their friends. But some of them, maybe you, will hear the truth in these words, will recognize the voice of the shepherd calling his sheep, will respond while there's still time. I'll see you tomorrow night with the first location. Until then, pray, seek his face, and ask him if you're one of the ones who needs to run, because February is coming, and it's coming fast. It was January 24th, 2026, at 1:33 a.m., when I found myself driving back up that mountain road, except this time I wasn't running from a dream. I was running toward a promise, and the difference between those two things is everything. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees since the night before, and as my truck climbed the winding switchbacks, I could see my breath fogging the windshield despite the heater running full blast. The stars overhead seemed even brighter than they had been 24 hours earlier, as if the sky itself was leaning closer to witness what was about to happen. I need to tell you what happened in the hours between that first encounter and this second one, because it's important. It's part of the story. After I recorded that first message yesterday morning, I collapsed into bed around 6 a.m. and slept for maybe 3 hours. When I woke up, my phone was exploding. Hundreds of comments, thousands of views, and the responses were exactly what Jesus had predicted. Some people were hungry, desperate, asking for more information. Others were mocking, calling me a false prophet, saying I'd lost my mind. One comment that stuck with me said, This is what happens when an actor can't separate himself from the role he plays. But here's what that person didn't understand. I'm not confusing myself with Jesus. I'm finally understanding the difference between portraying him and actually following him, and that difference is a chasm as wide as the one I stood beside last night. I spent most of yesterday in prayer, fasting, asking Jesus if I'd really heard him correctly or if I was losing my grip on reality. And every time I asked, I felt the same response in my spirit. Tonight. Come back tonight. I'll show you the first place. So here I was again, pulling into that same overlook parking area, killing the engine, stepping out into air so cold it felt like breathing knives. The wind was stronger tonight, coming in gusts that made the pine trees surrounding the overlook bend and sway, their branches creaking like old ships at sea. The sky was different tonight, too. Clouds were moving in from the west, thick and dark, obscuring some of the stars. But directly overhead there was still a clear patch, and through it I could see Orion's belt, those 3 stars in perfect alignment, and I remembered that Jesus is called the bright morning star, and I wondered if the stars themselves were witnesses to what was happening on this mountain. I walked toward the overlook, and this time I wasn't surprised to see him already there. He was standing in the same impossible place, at the cliff's edge beyond the railing. But tonight he wasn't looking out at the darkness. He was looking at me, waiting. "You came back," he said, and there was something in his voice, approval, maybe, or relief. "You told me to," I said, gripping the railing with both hands. The metal was so cold it burned through my gloves. "Many people hear me tell them things," he said quietly. "Few actually obey." "Do you know how many people I've spoken to in the last month, Jonathan? How many dreams I've sent? How many whispers in the night? How many signs I've placed directly in their path?" I shook my head. "Thousands," he said. "Tens of thousands. And do you know how many have responded? How many have actually changed their course, rearranged their lives, taken me seriously? How many? You're standing on a mountain at 1:33 in the morning and freezing cold," he said. "What do you think?" The weight of that hit me hard. I thought about all the people who'd commented on the video, all the people who'd said they were praying, seeking, wanting to know more, and I wondered how many of them would actually do anything when the time came to move. "Come," Jesus said, extending his hand toward me. "I want to show you the first place." Again, I don't know how it happened. One moment I was behind the railing, the next I was standing beside him on that impossible ledge. But this time something was different. The air around us began to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement, except it was the middle of winter and the air was freezing. "Close your eyes," he said. I did. "Now open them." When I opened my eyes, we were no longer on the mountain. We were standing on a coastal cliff, and below us, maybe 200 feet down, the Pacific Ocean was throwing itself against rocks with a violence that made the sound of thunder seem gentle. The spray from the waves was reaching up toward us, and I could taste salt on my lips, feel the moisture in the air. The sky here was different. Dawn was breaking, painting the horizon in shades of pink and gold and deep purple, and seabirds were wheeling overhead, their cries sharp and wild. "Where are we?" I asked, having to shout over the sound of the waves. "Northern California," Jesus said. His voice carried clearly despite the noise, as if he was speaking directly into my mind as much as my ears. 40 miles north of the Oregon border. Do you see that formation?" He pointed down the coastline to where a series of massive rock formations jutted out of the ocean, creating a natural harbor of sorts. The rocks were dark, almost black, and they rose from the water like the fingers of a giant hand reaching toward the sky. "There's a community there," he continued. "Small, maybe 300 people. They've been praying for years for revival, for awakening, for me to move in power. They've been faithful in the small things, faithful in the hidden things, and now I'm going to use them as a refuge." "A refuge from what?" I asked. "Lord, you keep talking about February's tribulation, but you haven't told me what it actually is." He turned to look at me, and the grief in his eyes was even deeper than it had been the night before. "Do you remember what I said in Matthew 24? When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." "Yes, but what if I told you that the abomination isn't just a future event in Jerusalem?" he said. "What if I told you it's already standing in the holy place, that it's been standing there for years, and my people have been so blind, so comfortable, so distracted, that they haven't even noticed?" The wind picked up suddenly and the spray from the waves intensified. I could feel the moisture soaking through my jacket, but I didn't care. I was transfixed by what he was saying. The holy place isn't just a temple in Jerusalem, Jonathan. The holy place is my church, my people, the ones who are supposed to be set apart, consecrated, holy. And the abomination that's standing there is the spirit of compromise, the spirit of comfort, the spirit that says you can have me and the world, that says you can serve two masters, that says you can be lukewarm and still be mine. He gestured out toward the ocean, where the waves continued their relentless assault on the rocks. Do you see those waves? They've been hitting those rocks for thousands of years, and the rocks remain. Do you know why? Because they're solid, I said. Because they're anchored. Exactly, he said. And that's what this place represents. This is where I'm calling people who are willing to be rocks. People who won't be moved by the waves of culture, by the tides of popular opinion, by the storms of persecution. People who will stand firm when everything around them is chaos. He began walking along the cliff's edge, and I followed, my boots slipping slightly on the wet grass. Below us, the ocean continued its violent dance with the shore, and I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was a narrow path carved into the cliff face, leading down to a small beach area protected by those rock formations. In February, Jesus said, there's going to be an economic collapse, not just a recession, not just a market correction, a complete systemic failure. The dollar will lose 70% of its value in a matter of days. Banks will close, supply chains will break down completely, and the people who've built their security on their bank accounts, their retirement funds, their investments, they're going to panic. He stopped walking and turned to face me. But the people here in this community, they've already learned to live simply. They grow their own food. They've built relationships based on mutual support, not mutual profit. They know how to survive without the systems that are about to fail. And more importantly, they know me. Not just about me. They actually know my voice. How many people can come here? I asked. As many as I send, he said. The community doesn't know it yet, but they're about to receive an influx. Starting in late January, people are going to start showing up. People who've heard my voice telling them to move. People who've had dreams about this coastline. People who've felt an unexplainable pull toward Northern California, and the community will welcome them because I'm preparing their hearts right now, even as we speak. He knelt down at the cliff's edge, and I knelt beside him. From this angle, I could see more details of the area below. There were caves in the cliff face, natural formations that had been carved by millennia of wind and water. There were tide pools teeming with life. There were places where fresh water streams met the ocean, creating unique ecosystems. This is a place of provision, Jesus said softly. The ocean will provide food, the land will provide shelter, the community will provide fellowship, and I will provide protection. When the chaos begins in the cities, when the violence spreads, when people are turning on each other out of desperation, this place will be hidden. Not invisible, but hidden, protected by my hand. How long? I asked. How long will people need to be here? That depends on them, he said, on whether they use this time to truly seek my face or whether they just use it as a survival strategy. Some will be here for months, some for years, some will leave too early and regret it. Some will try to come too late and find the way closed. He stood up, and I stood with him. The sun was fully above the horizon now, and the light was turning the ocean from dark blue to brilliant turquoise in places. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and I understood suddenly why he'd chosen to show me this place at dawn. It was a picture of hope, of new beginnings, of light breaking through darkness. There's a man there, Jesus said, pointing toward the distant community, though I couldn't see any buildings from where we stood. His name is Marcus. He's been a fisherman for 40 years. He's been praying for revival for 30 of those years. He's about to see the answer to his prayers, but not in the way he expected. Tell him, when you share this message, tell him that the nets he's been mending are about to be filled. He'll understand what that means. Lord, how am I supposed to tell people about this place without causing a stampede? I asked. Without creating panic or... You're not supposed to prevent those things, he interrupted. You're supposed to deliver the message. What people do with it is between them and me. Some will hear and respond immediately. Some will hear and hesitate. Some will hear and mock. And all of those responses will reveal what's really in their hearts. Suddenly, the air shimmered again, and we were back on the mountain overlook. The transition was so abrupt that I staggered, grabbing the railing for support. The cold hit me like a physical blow after the relatively mild coastal air. My jacket was still damp from the ocean spray, and it was already starting to freeze. Jesus was still standing at the cliff's edge, but now he was looking at me with an intensity that made me want to look away, except I couldn't. "Tomorrow night," he said, "I'll show you the second place, but tonight I need you to understand something crucial. These 5 places aren't just about physical survival. They're about spiritual refinement. They're about separating those who truly want me from those who just want my benefits. They're about creating a remnant that will emerge from this tribulation, purified, powerful, and ready to do the work I've called them to do." "What work?" I asked. "Rebuilding," he said simply. "When the systems collapse, when the institutions fail, when everything people trusted in turns to dust, there's going to be a vacuum. And that vacuum will either be filled with my kingdom or with something much darker. The people I'm gathering in these 5 places, they're going to be the foundation of what comes next. They're going to be the ones who know how to build on the rock instead of on sand." The wind gusted hard, and I heard that sound again, the voices, millions of them crying out. But this time, mixed in with the cries of desperation, I heard something else. Singing. Worship. Prayers of faith instead of fear. "Do you hear that?" Jesus asked. "Yes. It's different than last night. That's the sound of the remnant," he said. "The ones who will respond to this message, the ones who will move when I say move, the ones who will trust me even when it doesn't make sense, even when their families think they're crazy, even when they have to leave everything behind." He took a step toward me, and suddenly he was on my side of the railing, standing close enough that I could see the details of his face in the starlight. There were lines around his eyes, not from age, but from the weight of what he carried, from the burden of loving a world that mostly rejected him. "Jonathan, I need you to understand the cost of what I'm asking you to do," he said quietly. "When you share this message, you're going to lose friends, you're going to lose opportunities, you're going to be labeled as extreme, as dangerous, as someone who's gone off the deep end. Are you willing to pay that price?" I thought about The Chosen, about the platform it had given me, about the doors it had opened, about the respect I'd earned in certain circles, and I thought about all of that potentially crumbling because I was claiming to have private revelations from Jesus about safe places and coming tribulation. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," I admitted. "You're not," he said, and there was no condemnation in his voice. "But I am, and that's the point. This isn't about your strength. It's about your willingness, your obedience, your trust that I know what I'm doing even when you can't see the full picture." He placed his hand on my shoulder, and I felt warmth spread through my body despite the freezing air. "Go home, rest, share what I've shown you, and tomorrow night come back. There are 4 more places to reveal, and time is running short." Then he was gone, not fading away, not walking away, just gone, as if he'd never been there at all, except I was still warm where his hand had touched my shoulder, and my jacket was still damp with ocean spray from a coastline hundreds of miles away. I'm recording this message now, and it's 4:47 a.m. I've been awake for over 24 hours, and I should be exhausted, but I'm not. I'm wired, energized, terrified, and exhilarated at the same time. Here's what I need you to understand. The first refuge is in Northern California, 40 miles north of the Oregon border, in a small coastal community near distinctive black rock formations. I can't give you an exact address because I don't have one. But if you're meant to be there, if you're one of the ones Jesus is calling to that place, you'll know. You'll feel it in your spirit. You'll have confirmation through dreams, through other believers, through circumstances that align in ways that can't be coincidental. The man to look for is named Marcus. He's a fisherman. He's been praying for revival for 30 years. When you find him, tell him that the nets he's been mending are about to be filled. He'll know what that means, and he'll know that you've been sent. But here's what you need to do before you even think about going there. First, you need to pray and ask Jesus directly if this is where he's calling you. Don't just assume. Don't just panic and run. Some of you are meant to be there. Many of you are not. Some of you are called to one of the other 4 locations I haven't revealed yet. Some of you are called to stay exactly where you are and be light in the darkness that's coming. Second, if you feel called to go, you need to start preparing now. Not in February, now. That means getting your affairs in order. That means having difficult conversations with family members who won't understand. That means being willing to look foolish in the eyes of people whose opinions you value. Third, you need to understand that this isn't a vacation destination. This isn't a retreat center. This is a refuge for people who are willing to live simply, work hard, and prioritize community and faith over comfort and convenience. If you're going there expecting to maintain your current lifestyle, you're going for the wrong reasons. I know some of you are already typing comments asking for more specific details, asking for GPS coordinates or street addresses or phone numbers. And I understand that impulse, but I'm telling you, if you need that level of specificity, you're probably not meant to be there. The people who are truly called will have enough information to find it. The Holy Spirit will guide them. The details will fall into place. Others of you are already dismissing this as nonsense. You're thinking, this is just fear-mongering. This is just another false prophet making predictions that won't come true. And that's fine. You're free to think that. But I'm asking you to at least consider the possibility that you're wrong, that your skepticism isn't wisdom, it's pride, that your dismissal of this message isn't discernment, it's deafness to the voice of God. Because here's what I know, in less than 3 weeks, February begins. And when it does, when the economic collapse starts, when the chaos spreads, when the systems you've trusted in begin to fail, you're going to remember this message. You're going to remember that someone tried to warn you, and you're going to have to decide whether to humble yourself and seek refuge or whether to double down on your skepticism and face the consequences. I've already seen hundreds of prayer requests in the comments from yesterday's video. Keep them coming. But more than that, I need you to leave comments telling me if you felt something when I described this coastal location, if you've had dreams about the ocean, if you've felt an unexplainable pull toward Northern California, because I believe Jesus is confirming his call through multiple witnesses, and your testimony might be the confirmation someone else needs. Tonight actually, since it's already early morning, I'm going back to that mountain for the third time. Jesus is going to show me the second location, and I'll share it with you as soon as I can, but right now, I need you to sit with what I've shared. I need you to pray about it. I need you to ask Jesus if you're one of the ones he's calling to that coastal refuge. And if you are, I need you to start moving. Not in February, now, because the clock is ticking, the waves are rising, and the rocks are waiting for those who are willing to stand firm. I'll see you in the next message with the second location. Until then, may you have ears to hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Because he's speaking, the question is, are you listening? It was January 25th, 2026 at 3:11 a.m. when I pulled into that mountain overlook for the third consecutive night, and this time the sky was completely obscured by clouds so thick and low that they seemed to press down on the earth like a heavy blanket, and there was electricity in the air. Not metaphorical, but actual static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up even through my jacket, and I knew before I even got out of the truck that tonight was going to be different, that tonight Jesus wasn't just going to show me one location, but multiple locations, and that tonight I was going to see things that would change me forever. The temperature had risen slightly. It was maybe 35 degrees instead of the mid-20s it had been the previous 2 nights, but the air felt heavier, pregnant with moisture, and something else I couldn't name. As I walked toward the overlook, I could smell ozone, that sharp metallic scent that comes before a lightning storm, and in the distance I could hear the low rumble of thunder, though I couldn't see any flashes yet through the thick cloud cover. Jesus was already there, standing at the cliff's edge, but tonight he looked different. There was an intensity to his presence that hadn't been there before, a barely contained power that made the air around him shimmer and pulse. When he turned to look at me, his eyes were blazing, not with anger, but with urgency, with the weight of what he was about to reveal. "We don't have much time," he said, and his voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. "The enemy knows what I'm doing. He knows I'm gathering my remnant, and he's already moving to prevent it, to confuse it, to create counterfeits that will lead people astray. So tonight I'm going to show you 3 more locations, and I'm going to show you what happens to those who ignore these warnings." Before I could respond, he reached out and took my hand, and the moment his fingers closed around mine, the world exploded into light. We were standing in a desert, but not like any desert I'd ever seen. The sand beneath our feet was red, not orange or tan, but deep crimson red like dried blood. The sky above was that particular shade of blue that only exists in places where the air is so dry and clear that you can see forever, and the sun was directly overhead, beating down with an intensity that should have been unbearable, except that standing next to Jesus, I felt perfectly comfortable, perfectly protected. "Arizona," he said, gesturing to the landscape around us, 60 miles south of the Grand Canyon. "Do you see those formations?" I looked where he was pointing and saw a series of red rock spires rising from the desert floor, like the towers of some ancient cathedral. They were massive, hundreds of feet tall, and they were arranged in a rough circle, creating a natural amphitheater in the center. "There's a spring there," Jesus continued, starting to walk toward the formations. I followed, and I noticed that our feet left no prints in the red sand, as if we were walking slightly above the surface rather than on it. It's been flowing for thousands of years. The native peoples who lived here considered it sacred, and they were right to do so. I placed it there. I've been protecting it, and now I'm going to use it as a refuge for those who are willing to embrace the wilderness. As we got closer to the rock formations, I could see more details. There were caves in the base of the spires, natural formations that had been carved by wind and water over millennia. There were petroglyphs on some of the rock faces, ancient symbols and images that spoke of a people who had understood something about the sacred nature of this place. "This location is different from the coastal refuge," Jesus said. "The coast is about community, about people coming together to support each other. But this is about solitude, about individuals and families who need to be stripped down to nothing so they can be rebuilt from the foundation up. This is where I'm sending people who've been too comfortable, too compromised, too entangled with the world. This is where they'll learn what it means to depend entirely on me." We reached the center of the rock circle, and there it was, a spring bubbling up from the ground, creating a small pool of crystal clear water that seemed impossibly blue against the red sand. Around the spring there was vegetation. Desert plants, yes, but also things that shouldn't have been able to grow in this environment. I saw fruit trees, small but healthy. I saw herbs and vegetables growing in carefully tended plots. "There's a man here," Jesus said. "His name is Thomas. He's been living in this desert for 7 years, ever since I called him out of a megachurch ministry where he was the worship pastor. He had everything: salary, recognition, influence. And I asked him to give it all up and come here, to live alone, to pray, to prepare this place for what's coming. Most people thought he'd lost his mind. His wife divorced him. His children won't speak to him. But he obeyed, and now his obedience is about to bear fruit." I looked around and saw evidence of Thomas's work. There were simple shelters built into some of the caves using natural materials and minimal modern supplies. There were solar panels positioned to catch the intense desert sun. There were rainwater collection systems, though I couldn't imagine it rained much here. Everything spoke of careful preparation, of someone who had learned to live with almost nothing and found it was enough. "How many people can this place support?" I asked. "Fewer than the coast," Jesus said. "Maybe 50, 60 at most. But the people who come here, they're going to emerge transformed. They're going to learn things about faith, about trust, about my provision that they could never learn in comfort. This is where I'm sending the ones who've been living on spiritual junk food, feeding them a diet of nothing but me until they remember what real nourishment tastes like." He knelt beside the spring and cupped his hands, bringing water to his lips. Then he looked up at me. "Drink," he said. I knelt beside him and did the same. The water was cold and sweet, and the moment it touched my tongue, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just physical refreshment. It was like drinking pure faith, pure trust, pure dependence on God. I understood in that moment why he'd chosen this place, why the desert has always been where God does his deepest work. "Tell them," Jesus said, standing up, "that Thomas will welcome them, that he's been preparing for their arrival, that he'll teach them how to survive in the wilderness, but more importantly, he'll teach them how to thrive in my presence. Tell them that the spring will never run dry, that I'll provide for every need, but that they need to come with nothing. No savings accounts, no backup plans, no safety nets, just faith." Thunder rumbled overhead, and I looked up to see that clouds had appeared in the previously clear sky, dark and roiling. Jesus stood up, and his expression had shifted from gentle instruction to something harder, more urgent. "Come," he said. "There's more to see, and the time is short." The light flashed again, and suddenly we were standing on a different mountain, not the overlook where I'd parked my truck, but somewhere else entirely. The air here was thin and cold, so cold that my breath came out in great white plumes, and I realized we were at a much higher elevation. Snow covered the ground, not deep but persistent, and all around us were peaks that stretched up toward a sky that was beginning to lighten with the approach of dawn. "Colorado," Jesus said. "The Rocky Mountains, 11,000 feet above sea level. Do you see that valley?" He pointed down into a basin nestled between several peaks. Even in the dim pre-dawn light, I could see that it was beautiful, a high alpine valley with a small lake at its center, surrounded by meadows that I imagined would be filled with wildflowers in summer. There were stands of pine and aspen, and I could see the silver thread of a stream feeding into the lake. "There's a community there," Jesus said. 40 families. They've been living off-grid for 15 years, ever since they felt me calling them out of the cities. They've built a sustainable life, solar power, wind power, their own food production, their own water systems. They've been preparing without even knowing exactly what they were preparing for. But I knew. I've been guiding them, shaping them, getting them ready for what's coming. As the light continued to grow, I could see more details. There were cabins scattered around the valley, built from local timber, designed to blend into the landscape. There were greenhouses, livestock pens, workshops. Everything spoke of a community that had learned to be self-sufficient, that had rejected the dependence on systems that were about to fail. "This is the third refuge," Jesus said. "And this one is about families, about parents who are willing to protect their children from what's coming, about people who understand that the greatest inheritance they can leave isn't money or property, but faith and skills and the knowledge of how to live in my kingdom regardless of what the world's kingdoms are doing." The wind picked up, and I could hear it whistling through the peaks around us, a sound like voices singing in a language I couldn't understand but somehow recognized. Jesus walked to the edge of the overlook where we stood, and I followed, looking down into the valley as the sun finally broke over the eastern peaks, flooding the basin with golden light. "There's a woman there," he said. "Her name is Sarah. She's a doctor who gave up a lucrative practice in Denver to come here. She's been training others in wilderness medicine, in how to treat injuries and illnesses without access to hospitals or pharmacies. She's going to be crucial in the months ahead because people are going to arrive at these refugees injured, sick, traumatized, and she'll be there to help heal them, body and soul." "Lord," I said, and my voice was shaking now, "you keep talking about people arriving at these places, but how will they know? How will they find them? These aren't exactly easy locations to stumble upon." He turned to look at me, and there was something in his eyes, a mixture of sadness and determination. "Jonathan, do you remember what I said in John 10? My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. The people who are mine, the ones who've actually cultivated a relationship with me, who've learned to recognize my voice, they'll know. They'll have dreams. They'll have visions. They'll have encounters like the one you're having right now. They'll have confirmations through other believers, through circumstances, through that still small voice that they've learned to trust." He paused, and the sadness in his eyes deepened. "But the ones who've only had a casual relationship with me, who've treated me like a cosmic vending machine or a life coach or a get-out-of-hell-free card, they won't hear. They won't recognize my voice because they've never taken the time to learn it. And when February comes, when the tribulation begins, they're going to be caught completely unprepared." The light flashed again, but this time it was different, harsher, more violent. And suddenly we were back on the original mountain overlook, except now the storm that had been threatening had arrived in full force. Lightning was splitting the sky, thunder was shaking the ground beneath our feet, and rain was falling in sheets so thick I could barely see Jesus standing just a few feet away from me. "Watch!" he shouted over the storm. "Watch what happens to those who ignore the warnings." The darkness below the overlook suddenly lit up, not with lightning, but with that same supernatural light I'd seen on the first night, and I saw cities, dozens of them, hundreds of them, in chaos. I saw banks with their doors chained shut and crowds of people rioting outside. I saw grocery stores stripped bare, their shelves empty, their windows smashed. I saw highways clogged with cars that had run out of gas, abandoned by their owners who were trying to flee on foot. I saw churches, massive megachurches with their stadium seating and their concert lighting, and they were empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of presence. There was no light there, no life, just hollow buildings that had been built on sand, and now the storm was washing them away. "Do you see?" Jesus shouted, and there was anguish in his voice now. "Do you see what happens when people build their faith on prosperity instead of on me? When they trust in their bank accounts instead of in my provision? When they love the blessings more than they love the blesser?" The vision shifted, and now I was seeing people I recognized, pastors I'd met, Christian celebrities, worship leaders, authors, influencers, people who had platforms, who had audiences, who had claimed to speak for God, and they were panicking, scrambling, trying to save themselves and their families, and I could see in their faces that they had no idea what to do because they'd never actually learned to hear God's voice. They'd learned to perform, to entertain, to build brands, but they'd never learned to follow. "This is what breaks my heart," Jesus said, and I could hear tears in his voice even over the storm. "Not the people who never knew me. I can work with honest unbelief, but the people who thought they knew me, who built entire ministries and careers on my name, but who never actually took the time to know me, who never learned to recognize my voice, who never developed the kind of relationship that would allow them to hear me when I whisper, 'Run.'" Lightning struck close, so close that I felt the heat of it, smelled the ozone, felt the concussive force of the thunder that followed. And in that flash of light, I saw something else. I saw people streaming toward the 3 refugees Jesus had shown me. I saw them arriving at the coastal community, at the desert spring, at the mountain valley, and I saw them being welcomed, being fed, being sheltered. I saw them learning to live simply, to trust completely, to depend entirely on God. But I also saw others, people who had heard the warnings but had waited too long, who had hesitated, who had made excuses. And I saw them trying to reach the refugees after February had begun, after the chaos had spread, and I saw them being turned away. Not because the communities were cruel, but because the window had closed, because the time for preparation had passed and the time for survival had begun. "There are 2 more locations," Jesus said, and he had to shout to be heard over the storm. "But I'm not going to show them to you tonight. I'm going to show them to you tomorrow, on the final night. Because tonight I need you to understand something crucial. These refugees aren't just about physical safety. They're about spiritual positioning. They're about being in the right place, with the right people, with the right heart, when everything changes." He stepped closer to me, close enough that I could see the water streaming down his face, except I realized it wasn't rain, it was tears. Jesus was weeping. "I'm offering a way of escape," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm providing places of refuge. I'm giving clear instructions, specific locations, detailed guidance. And still, most of them won't come. Most of them will ignore these warnings. Most of them will convince themselves that it's not real, that it's not urgent, that they have more time. And when February comes, when the tribulation begins, they're going to cry out to me and ask why I didn't warn them. And I'll have to say, I did warn you. I sent messengers. I gave you dreams. I provided specific instructions. But you were too comfortable to listen, too proud to obey, too attached to your current life to embrace the life I was offering you." Another lightning strike, this one even closer. The thunder was instantaneous, deafening, and in that moment I understood something. This storm wasn't just a natural phenomenon. It was a picture, a preview, a warning of what was coming in February. "Go home," Jesus said. "Rest. Share what I've shown you today. And tomorrow night, the final night, come back one more time. I'll show you the last 2 locations. I'll give you the final warnings. And then it will be up to them, up to you, up to everyone who hears this message to decide whether they're going to respond or whether they're going to ignore it and face the consequences." The lightning flashed one more time, and when my vision cleared, I was alone on the overlook. The storm was already moving east, the rain tapering off to a drizzle. My clothes were soaked through, and I was shaking, not from cold, but from the weight of what I'd just witnessed. I looked at my phone. It was 5:47 a.m. I'd been on that mountain for over 2.5 hours, though it had felt like minutes, and I had 3 more locations to share, 3 more warnings to deliver, and less than a week before February began. I'm recording this message now, and I don't even know where to start. My hands are still shaking. My voice is going to sound rough because I've been crying for the last hour, ever since I got home from that mountain. Tonight, Jesus showed me 3 locations. Let me be clear about what I saw. The second refuge is in Arizona, 60 miles south of the Grand Canyon. It's a desert location centered around a series of red rock spires arranged in a natural circle. There's a spring there that never runs dry. The man to look for is named Thomas. He's been living there alone for 7 years, preparing this place. He'll welcome you, but you need to come with nothing. No backup plans, no safety nets, just faith. The third refuge is in the Colorado Rockies at 11,000 feet elevation. It's a high alpine valley with a lake at its center, surrounded by peaks. There's a community there of about 40 families who've been living off-grid for 15 years. The woman to look for is named Sarah. She's a doctor. She'll be there to help heal those who arrive injured or sick. But here's what you need to understand. These aren't vacation destinations. These aren't retreat centers. These are refuges for people who are willing to give up everything, and I mean everything, to follow Jesus into the wilderness. If you're going to these places thinking you can maintain your current lifestyle, your current comfort level, your current conveniences, you're going for the wrong reasons and you won't last. I also saw tonight what happens to those who ignore these warnings. And I'm telling you, it's worse than anything I could have imagined. The economic collapse that's coming in February isn't going to be a temporary inconvenience. It's going to be a complete systemic failure. Banks will close, supply chains will break down, the dollar will become nearly worthless. And the people who've built their security on their bank accounts, their investments, their retirement funds, they're going to panic. But worse than the economic collapse is the spiritual collapse I saw. I saw churches, massive churches with thousands of members, completely empty. Not because people stopped believing in God, but because they realized too late that the buildings they'd been attending weren't actually houses of God. They were entertainment venues. They were social clubs. They were businesses built on the name of Jesus, but not on the presence of Jesus. I saw Christian leaders, people with platforms, people with influence, people who've written books and recorded albums and preached to thousands, and they were just as lost and confused as everyone else. Because they'd built their ministries on performance instead of on relationship. They'd learned to talk about God without ever learning to actually hear from God. And I saw people trying to reach these refugees after it was too late, after February had begun, after the chaos had spread, and they were being turned away, not because the communities were cruel, but because the window for preparation had closed. Here's what I need you to do right now. First, pray about these 3 locations I've shared. Ask Jesus directly if he's calling you to one of them. Don't just assume, don't just panic. Some of you are meant to be at the coast, some in the desert, some in the mountains, some at the 2 locations I haven't revealed yet, and some of you are meant to stay exactly where you are. Second, if you feel called to one of these places, start preparing immediately. Not next week, not after you finish this project at work, or after you celebrate this holiday, or after you have one more conversation with your family. Now. Today. Because we have less than a week before February begins, and once it starts, travel is going to become exponentially more difficult. Third, understand that going to these places means giving up everything: your career, your home, your savings, your comfort, your reputation, everything. If you're not willing to do that, if you're still trying to hedge your bets or keep one foot in your old life, then you're not ready, and you need to get ready fast, or you need to accept that you're choosing to face what's coming without the protection these refugees offer. I know some of you think I've lost my mind. I know some of you are convinced this is all delusion or attention seeking or some kind of elaborate hoax. And honestly, I wish you were right. I wish this was all in my head. I wish I could go back to just being an actor who played Jesus in a TV show and didn't have to carry the weight of these warnings. But I can't, because I've seen what's coming. I've heard Jesus weeping over his people who won't listen. I've watched the vision of February's tribulation play out in supernatural clarity. And I can't unknow what I know. I can't unsee what I've seen. Tomorrow night is the final night. Jesus is going to show me the last 2 locations, and then the warnings will be complete. The instructions will be delivered, and it will be up to each person who hears this message to decide whether they're going to respond or ignore it. I'm begging you, and I don't use that word lightly, I'm begging you to take this seriously, to pray about it, to seek Jesus' face with genuine desperation, to ask him if you're one of the ones he's calling to these refugees. Because if you are and you ignore that call, you're going to regret it in ways I can't even fully describe. Leave your comments below. Tell me if you've had dreams about deserts or mountains. Tell me if you've felt an unexplainable pull toward Arizona or Colorado. Tell me if you know Thomas or Sarah or Marcus from the coastal community, because I believe Jesus is confirming his call through multiple witnesses, and your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Tomorrow I'll share the final 2 locations, and then it's up to you. The storm is coming, the refuges are prepared. The question is, will you run to safety while there's still time, or will you wait until it's too late? It's been 3 days since that final encounter on the mountain, and I'm still trying to process everything I saw, everything I heard, everything Jesus revealed to me on that 4th and final night. It was January 26th, 2026 at 2:22 a.m. when I made that last drive up the mountain road, and I knew in my bones that this was going to be different from the previous 3 nights, that what I was about to witness would be the culmination of everything, the final piece of a puzzle that would either save lives or condemn them, depending on how people responded. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving the air crystalline and impossibly clear. The temperature had dropped again, It was maybe 15 degrees, and every breath I took felt like inhaling shards of ice. But the sky was something I'll never forget. It was ablaze with stars, more stars than I'd ever seen in my life. And as I stood there at the overlook waiting for Jesus to appear, I realized I was looking at the same sky that Abraham had looked at when God promised him descendants as numerous as the stars, the same sky that the shepherds had looked at when angels announced the birth of the Messiah, the same sky that has witnessed every moment of human history, every triumph and tragedy, every act of faith and every act of betrayal. Jesus appeared not at the cliff's edge this time, but standing right beside me, so close that I could have reached out and touched him. And when I turned to look at him, I saw something in his face that I hadn't seen in the previous encounters: finality, resolution, the look of someone who has said everything that needs to be said and is now waiting to see what people will do with it. "This is the last night, Jonathan," he said quietly. "After tonight, the warnings are complete. The instructions are delivered, and then it's up to them. Up to you. Up to everyone who hears these words to decide whether they're going to trust me enough to obey." "I'm ready," I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. "No, you're not," he said, and there was gentleness in his voice. "But you're willing, and that's what I need. Willingness, not readiness. Obedience, not understanding. Trust, not certainty." He took my hand, and once again the world dissolved into light. We were standing in a forest, but not like the forests I'd seen in Colorado. These trees were ancient, massive beyond comprehension, their trunks so wide that it would take a dozen people holding hands to encircle them. The bark was reddish-brown and deeply furrowed, and when I looked up I couldn't even see the tops of the trees. They disappeared into a canopy so high and so thick that only scattered beams of sunlight made it through to the forest floor. "Northern California," Jesus said. "The redwood forests. These trees have been standing for over 2,000 years. Some of them were already ancient when I walked the earth in human form. They've survived fires, floods, droughts, storms. They've outlasted empires. They've witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, and they're still standing. The air here was different from anywhere else I'd been, thick with moisture, rich with the scent of earth and growing things, filled with a silence so profound it felt almost sacred. Ferns covered the forest floor, some of them as tall as I was. Moss draped from branches like green curtains, and everywhere, there was a sense of timelessness, of being in a place that existed outside the normal flow of hours and days and years. "This is the fourth refuge," Jesus said, beginning to walk deeper into the forest. I followed, and I noticed that the ground beneath our feet was soft, cushioned by centuries of fallen needles and decomposed organic matter. "This is for the contemplatives, for the mystics, for the ones who've been called to a life of prayer and intercession but have been trying to live it in the noise and chaos of the modern world. This is where I'm gathering my prayer warriors, the ones who will stand in the gap for the others, the ones who will hold the line in the spiritual realm while the physical realm falls apart." As we walked, I began to see signs of human presence. Not buildings exactly, but simple structures built into the natural landscape, lean-tos constructed from fallen branches, small shelters carved into the bases of the massive trees, platforms built high up in the canopy, where someone could sit and pray surrounded by nothing but sky and branches and the presence of God. "There's a community here," Jesus continued, "smaller than the others, maybe 20 people. They've been living in this forest for 3 years, ever since I called them out of their various ministries and careers and told them to come here and pray. They've been interceding for what's coming. They've been standing in the gap. They've been holding back the darkness through their prayers, buying time for the remnant to be gathered, and now their prayers are about to be answered in ways they never expected." We came to a clearing, a natural cathedral formed by a circle of the ancient redwoods. In the center was a simple altar made of stones, and on that altar was a fire burning, though I couldn't see any wood feeding it. The flames were steady, unwavering, and they gave off no smoke, only light and warmth. "This fire has been burning for 3 years," Jesus said. "Since the day the first intercessor arrived here. It's never gone out. It never will. It's a sign of my presence, my protection, my provision. And it's a reminder that I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. That what I did for Moses at the burning bush, what I did for Elijah on Mount Carmel, I'm still doing today for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear." "Who leads this community?" I asked. No one, he said. And everyone. They've learned to hear my voice directly, to follow my leading moment by moment. They don't need human hierarchy or organizational structure. They just need me. And that's what makes them so powerful, so dangerous to the enemy's plans. They can't be corrupted because they're not dependent on any human system. They can't be controlled because they answer only to me. He knelt beside the fire and I knelt with him. The flames danced and flickered, and in them I saw images, faces of people I didn't recognize, places I'd never been, events that hadn't happened yet. I understood suddenly that this fire was more than just a physical phenomenon. It was a window, a portal, a place where the veil between the physical and spiritual realms was so thin it was almost transparent. Tell them, Jesus said, his eyes reflecting the firelight, that this refuge is for those who are willing to give up not just their possessions and their comfort, but their need to understand, their need to have everything explained, their need to see the whole plan before they take the first step. This is for the ones who can live in mystery, who can embrace uncertainty, who can trust me even when nothing makes sense. The light shifted, and suddenly we were somewhere else. We were standing on the shore of a lake, and the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the water in shades of pink and gold and deep purple. Mist was rising from the surface, creating an ethereal atmosphere that made the whole scene look like something from a dream. The lake was surrounded by gentle hills covered in forest, and in the distance I could see mountains, their peaks still white with snow. Northern Minnesota, Jesus said, near the Canadian border. This lake has been here for 10,000 years, carved by glaciers during the last ice age. The native peoples who lived here called it the Lake of Spirits because they sensed something sacred about this place. And they were right. The air here was cold but not harsh, crisp and clean and filled with the scent of pine and fresh water. I could hear birds beginning to wake up, their calls echoing across the lake. I could hear the gentle lap of water against the shore, and underneath it all I could hear something else, a sound like singing, like worship, like the earth itself praising its creator. This is the fifth refuge, Jesus said, the last one, and this one is for the families, for the parents who are willing to protect their children, not just physically, but spiritually, for the ones who understand that the greatest threat to the next generation isn't economic collapse or social chaos, but spiritual deception. This is where I'm gathering families who will raise up children who actually know me, who can hear my voice, who will be the foundation of what comes after the tribulation. As the sun continued to rise, I could see more details of the area. There were cabins scattered around the lakeshore, simple but well built, designed to withstand harsh winters. There were gardens, greenhouses, workshops. There was a small dock with several boats tied to it, and there was a building that looked like it might be a school or a community center, with large windows facing the lake. There's a couple here, Jesus said. David and Ruth. They were missionaries for 20 years in Africa before I called them back to the States and told them to come here. They've been preparing this place for 5 years, building the infrastructure, establishing the systems, creating a community that can sustain itself indefinitely. They've been waiting for the families I'm sending, and now those families are about to arrive. We walked along the shore, and I noticed something unusual. There were stones placed at regular intervals along the water's edge, and on each stone was carved a name. I knelt down to look at one more closely and realized it was a child's name, followed by a date. What are these? I asked. Memorials, Jesus said quietly, for the children who won't make it, for the ones whose parents will wait too long, who will hesitate, who will convince themselves they have more time. David and Ruth have been praying over these stones for 2 years, weeping for children they've never met, interceding for families who don't even know this place exists yet. And in February, when the tribulation begins, some of these names will become reality. Some of these children will be lost because their parents didn't listen. The weight of that hit me like a physical blow. I looked at the stones. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, and I felt tears streaming down my face. These weren't just abstract warnings. These were real children, real families, real lives that hung in the balance based on whether people would respond to these messages or ignore them. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why show me this? Why make me carry this weight? Jesus knelt beside me, and when he spoke, his voice was filled with the same grief I was feeling. Because someone has to care enough to warn them. Someone has to love them enough to risk looking foolish, to risk being mocked, to risk losing everything in order to give them a chance to survive. And I've chosen you, Jonathan, not because you're special, not because you're more spiritual than anyone else, but because you were willing to say yes when I asked. He stood up and helped me to my feet. The sun was fully above the horizon now, and the mist was beginning to burn off the lake. In the growing light, I could see the full beauty of this place, the pristine water, the untouched forests, the sense of peace and safety that permeated everything. This refuge is different from the others, Jesus said. The coast is about community, the desert is about stripping away, the mountains are about sustainability, the forest is about intercession, but this place, this is about legacy. This is about raising up a generation that will rebuild after the collapse. Children who will grow up knowing my voice, knowing how to hear me, knowing how to follow me, regardless of what the world around them is doing. How will people find this place? I asked. It's so remote, so hidden. The same way they'll find all the others, he said, by listening to my voice, by following my leading, by trusting me enough to step out in faith even when it doesn't make sense. David and Ruth will welcome everyone I send, but only those I send will be able to find it. The light flashed one final time, and we were back on the mountain overlook. The sun was beginning to rise here too, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Jesus stood at the cliff's edge, silhouetted against the dawn, and when he turned to look at me, I saw something in his face that took my breath away. Hope mixed with heartbreak, love mixed with grief, infinite patience mixed with urgent desperation. It's done, he said. 5 refugees, 5 places of safety, 5 locations where my remnant can gather when February's tribulation begins. I've given you specific details. I've given you names of people to look for. I've given you enough information that anyone who truly wants to find these places will be able to find them. What happens now? I asked. Now you share what I've shown you, he said. You deliver the final warnings. You give people the information they need to make their choice, and then you wait and see who responds. And what about me? I asked. Where am I supposed to go? He smiled, and it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. You're not going to any of these places, Jonathan. Your refuge is going to be right where you are, because I need you to stay visible, to stay accessible, to continue delivering messages as I give them to you. You're going to watch the tribulation unfold from the inside, and you're going to document it, and you're going to be a voice of hope and truth in the midst of chaos. I don't know if I'm strong enough for that, I said. You're not, he said, but I am, and that's the point. That's always been the point. It's never been about your strength or your wisdom or your ability. It's always been about your willingness to be a vessel, a conduit, a voice for me in a world that desperately needs to hear from me. The sun was fully up now, and in its light I could see the valley below the overlook clearly for the first time. I could see the roads, the towns, the evidence of human civilization, and I knew that in just a few days, all of that was going to change. All of that was going to be tested in ways that most people couldn't even imagine. February 23rd, Jesus said suddenly. That's when it begins, the economic collapse, the triggering event. Mark that date, tell people, give them 1 month from today to prepare, to pray, to position themselves. 1 month to decide whether they're going to trust me enough to obey or whether they're going to cling to their current lives and face the consequences. What exactly happens on February 23rd? I asked. The Federal Reserve will announce an emergency meeting, he said, and in that meeting they'll reveal that the dollar has lost 70% of its value overnight due to a combination of factors that no one saw coming, or rather, that people saw coming but refused to believe. Within hours, banks will close, ATMs will stop working, credit cards will be declined, and the panic will begin. And the refugees? By then, everyone who's supposed to be there will already be there, he said, because I'm giving them a month to move, a month to prepare, a month to obey. After February 23rd, travel will become exponentially more difficult. Roads will be dangerous. Gas will be scarce. The window for easy movement will have closed. He placed his hand on my shoulder one final time. Go home, Jonathan. Rest. And then share everything I've shown you. Hold nothing back. Don't soften the warnings. Don't try to make it more palatable or less offensive. Just deliver the message exactly as I've given it to you, and then trust me with the results. Will I see you again? I asked. You see me every day, he said. You just don't always recognize me. But yes, we'll have more encounters, more messages, more warnings as events unfold. This isn't the end of our conversations, it's just the end of this particular series of revelations. And then he was gone, and I was standing alone on the mountain as the sun rose higher, warming the air, burning off the last of the night's cold. I stood there for a long time, looking out over the valley, thinking about everything I'd seen and heard over the past 4 nights, thinking about the 5 refuges, thinking about the people who would respond and the people who wouldn't, thinking about the children whose names were carved on stones by a lake in Minnesota, and I wept. I wept for what's coming. I wept for those who won't listen. I wept for the church that has become so comfortable, so compromised, so deaf to God's voice that it won't recognize the warning signs until it's too late. But I also wept with hope because I'd seen the refuges. I'd seen the provision. I'd seen that even in the midst of judgment, even in the midst of tribulation, God is still making a way for his remnant. He's still protecting those who are his. He's still faithful, even when we're faithless. It's now January 29th, 2026, and I'm recording this final message. I've shared the first 4 locations over the past 3 days, and the response has been exactly what Jesus predicted. Some people are responding with urgency and faith, making plans to move, reaching out to the communities I've mentioned. Others are mocking, dismissing, calling me a false prophet and a fearmonger. But I need to give you the 5th and final location, and I need to give you the specific date when everything changes. The 4th refuge is in the ancient redwood forests of Northern California. It's a place of prayer and intercession, led by a community of about 20 people who have been living there for 3 years. There's a fire burning in a clearing surrounded by massive redwood trees, a fire that never goes out, that produces no smoke, that burns as a sign of God's presence. This refuge is for the contemplatives, the intercessors, the ones called to a life of prayer. If you're meant to be there, you'll know, you'll feel it in your spirit, and you'll find it. The 5th refuge is on a lake in northern Minnesota near the Canadian border. The native peoples called it the Lake of Spirits. There's a community there led by a couple named David and Ruth, former missionaries who have been preparing this place for 5 years. This refuge is for families, for parents who want to raise children who actually know God's voice. There are cabins, gardens, everything needed for long-term sustainability. If you're meant to be there with your family, start moving now. And here's the date you need to mark, February 23rd, 2026. That's when the economic collapse begins. That's when the Federal Reserve announces the emergency that triggers everything. That's when the tribulation starts in earnest. You have 25 days from today, 25 days to pray, to seek God's face, to determine if you're called to one of these 5 refuges, 25 days to make arrangements, to have difficult conversations, to position yourself where God is calling you to be. After February 23rd, everything changes. Travel becomes dangerous. Resources become scarce. The window for easy movement closes. If you're supposed to be at one of these refuges and you're not there by then, you're going to face a much harder journey, if you can make it at all. Now let me talk to you about what you need to do practically, right now, today. First, you need to spend the next 30 days in intensive prayer and fasting, not casual prayer, not bless my food prayer. I'm talking about desperate, seeking, wrestling with God prayer. You need to ask him directly, am I called to one of these refuges? If so, which one, and what do I need to do to prepare? Don't just assume you're supposed to go. Don't just panic and run. Some of you are called to these places. Many of you are not. Some of you are called to stay exactly where you are and be light in the darkness, but you need to know which category you're in, and the only way to know is to ask God directly and wait for his answer. Second, if you feel called to one of these refuges, you need to start taking practical steps immediately. That means liquidating assets that you can't take with you, having honest conversations with family members about what you're sensing, making travel arrangements while travel is still relatively easy, gathering essential supplies, not to hoard, but to bring with you to contribute to the community, tying up loose ends in your current life so you can leave without regrets. Third, you need to understand that going to these refuges means giving up everything: your career, your home, your savings, your comfort, your reputation, everything. If you're trying to hedge your bets, if you're trying to keep one foot in your old life, if you're planning to go to a refuge but keep your house just in case, you're not ready. You're not hearing God clearly because he's calling for complete surrender, complete trust, complete dependence on him. Fourth, you need to connect with others who are sensing the same call. Leave comments below about which refuge you're feeling drawn to. Connect with other people in the comments. Form travel groups. Share resources. Support each other, because the enemy is going to try to isolate you, to make you think you're crazy, to convince you that you're the only one hearing this message. But you're not. There are thousands of you, and you need to find each other. Fifth, and this is crucial, you need to prepare your heart for what's coming. The tribulation that begins on February 23rd isn't going to be easy. It's going to test everything you believe. It's going to strip away every false foundation. It's going to reveal what's really in your heart. And if you're not spiritually prepared, if you haven't cultivated a genuine relationship with Jesus, if you've just been going through religious motions, you're not going to make it. Let me address some of the objections I know some of you are having. How do we know this is really from God and not just your imagination? You don't, not with certainty, not with proof. That's the nature of faith. But here's what I can tell you. I've been walking with Jesus for years. I've learned to recognize his voice, and what I've experienced over these past 4 nights is more real, more clear, more undeniable than anything I've ever experienced before. You're going to have to decide for yourself whether you believe me. But I'm telling you, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Why would God reveal this to an actor instead of to established church leaders? Because most established church leaders are too invested in the current system to hear what God is saying. They have too much to lose. They have buildings to maintain, salaries to pay, reputations to protect. They can't afford to deliver messages that might offend their donors or shrink their congregations. But I'm just an actor. I don't have a church to lose. I don't have a denomination to answer to. I'm free to deliver the message without worrying about the institutional consequences. This sounds like fear-mongering and manipulation. Does it? Or does it sound like a warning? When a weatherman tells you a hurricane is coming and you need to evacuate, is that fear-mongering? Or is that potentially life-saving information? I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm not asking for your money. I'm not building a compound and asking you to join my cult. I'm simply delivering information that Jesus gave me and letting you decide what to do with it. What if February 23rd comes and nothing happens? Then I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. I'll be the first to apologize for causing unnecessary panic. I'll be the first to acknowledge that I somehow misheard or misunderstood. But I'm telling you, I don't think that's going to happen. I think February 23rd is going to be exactly what Jesus showed me. And I think the people who ignore these warnings are going to deeply regret it. I want to share something personal with you. 3 days ago, after that final encounter on the mountain, I went back to the overlook in daylight. I wanted to see it in the sun, to walk the ground where I'd stood with Jesus, to process everything that had happened. And as I stood there looking out over the valley, I felt him speak to my heart one more time, not audibly, not visibly, just that still small voice that I've learned to recognize. He said, "Jonathan, most of them won't listen. Most of them will ignore these warnings. Most of them will convince themselves that they have more time, that it's not really urgent, that they can wait and see what happens. And that's going to break your heart. But you need to deliver the message anyway. Because the few who do listen, the remnant who do respond, they're worth it. Every single one of them is worth the mockery you'll face, the criticism you'll endure, the cost you'll pay for obedience." And he was right. Over the past 3 days, I've received thousands of comments. Some of them are from people who are taking this seriously, who are praying, who are making plans to move. Those comments fill me with hope. But I've also received comments from people who are mocking, who are calling me names, who are saying I've destroyed my career and my reputation. And those comments hurt. They hurt because I know that some of those people are going to face the tribulation unprepared. They're going to wish they'd listened. They're going to cry out to God and ask why he didn't warn them. And he'll have to say, "I did warn you, but you were too proud to listen." So here's my final challenge to you. For the next 30 days, from now until February 23rd, I want you to spend at least 30 minutes every single day in prayer and Bible reading. Not casual prayer, not distracted prayer, focused, intentional, desperate prayer. Ask God to speak to you. Ask him to show you where you're supposed to be. Ask him to prepare your heart for what's coming. Read the passages about Noah and the flood. Read about Lot fleeing Sodom. Read about the Israelites leaving Egypt. Read about Jesus warning his disciples to flee Jerusalem. Notice the pattern. God always warns his people before judgment comes. He always provides a way of escape, but he also requires obedience, faith, and action. Keep a journal of what God shows you. Write down your dreams. Write down the verses that jump out at you. Write down the confirmations you receive, because you're going to need that record in the days ahead. You're going to need to remember what God said when circumstances make it tempting to doubt. Connect with other believers who are taking this seriously. Don't try to walk this path alone. Find people who can pray with you, encourage you, hold you accountable. form groups, share resources, support each other, and most importantly, obey what God tells you. If He says go, go. If He says stay, stay. If He says wait, wait. But whatever He says, do it. Don't hesitate. Don't make excuses. Don't try to negotiate. Just obey. I want to read you some of the comments I've received over the past 3 days because I think they'll encourage you. I've been having dreams about a coastal community for 6 months. I didn't understand what they meant until I watched your first video. I'm making plans to move to Northern California next week. My husband and I have felt called to simplify our lives for years, but we kept putting it off. After watching your videos, we realized we've been preparing for this without even knowing it. We're selling our house and heading to Colorado. I'm a single mom with 3 kids. I don't have much money. I don't know how I'm going to make this work. But I know God is calling me to that lake in Minnesota. I'm trusting Him to make a way. These are the people who are hearing God's voice. These are the ones who are responding in faith. These are the remnant. But I've also received comments like these: "You're a false prophet and you're going to hell for deceiving people." This is the most irresponsible thing I've ever seen. You're going to cause people to make terrible decisions that will ruin their lives. I used to respect you, but now I see you've completely lost your mind. And to those people, I want to say this: I understand your skepticism, I understand your concern, and I'm not asking you to believe me just because I say so. I'm asking you to pray about it, to seek God's face, to ask Him directly if there's any truth to what I'm sharing, because if I'm wrong, you'll know. God will make it clear. But if I'm right and you ignore these warnings because of pride or skepticism or fear of looking foolish, you're going to regret it. Let me paint you a picture of what February 23rd is going to look like based on what Jesus showed me. You're going to wake up that morning and everything is going to seem normal. You're going to check your phone, maybe scroll through social media, maybe check the news, and then you're going to see the headlines: Federal Reserve calls emergency meeting, dollar in free fall, markets suspended. At first, you might not think much of it. The markets have had problems before. The Fed has intervened before. This is probably just another temporary crisis that will blow over in a few days. But then you're going to try to use your credit card and it's going to be declined. You're going to try to withdraw cash from an ATM and it's going to say temporarily out of service. You're going to try to buy groceries and the store is going to be packed with panicked people clearing the shelves. By that evening, you're going to see riots in major cities. You're going to see people fighting over food, over gas, over basic necessities. You're going to see the thin veneer of civilization start to crack. And if you're not already where you're supposed to be, if you're not already at one of the refuges or positioned where God has called you to stay, you're going to realize that you waited too long, that the window has closed, that what seemed like plenty of time has run out. That's what's coming in 25 days, not 25 months, not 25 years, 25 days. I want to end with this. I've been back to that mountain overlook 3 times since that final encounter with Jesus. Each time I've stood at that cliff's edge and looked out over the valley and prayed for everyone who's going to watch these videos. I've prayed for the ones who will respond. I've prayed for the ones who won't. I've prayed for the families who will make it to the refuges. I've prayed for the ones who won't. And each time I've felt Jesus' presence there with me, not visibly, not audibly, but unmistakably. And each time I've heard Him whisper the same thing: trust me, obey me, and watch what I do. That's what I'm asking you to do. Trust Him, obey Him, and watch what He does. If you're called to the coastal community in Northern California, go. Find Marcus. Tell him the nets are about to be filled. He'll welcome you. If you're called to the desert in Arizona, go. Find Thomas. Tell him you've come with nothing but faith. He'll teach you how to survive in the wilderness. If you're called to the mountain valley in Colorado, go. Find Sarah. Tell her you need healing, body and soul. She'll help you. If you're called to the redwood forest, go. Find the fire that never goes out. Sit beside it, pray, intercede. Hold the line in the spiritual realm. If you're called to the lake in Minnesota, go. Find David and Ruth. Bring your family. Raise your children in a place where they can learn to hear God's voice. And if you're called to stay where you are, stay. But prepare. Stock up on essentials. Build community with other believers. Get ready to be light in the darkness. Whatever God is calling you to do it now. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Don't make excuses. Because February 23rd is coming. The tribulation is coming. And the time to prepare is now. I'm going to ask you one final time. Leave your comments below. Tell me what you're sensing. Tell me what God is speaking to you. Tell me if you're going to one of the refuges or if you're staying where you are. Tell me your fears, your doubts, your questions. But most importantly, Tell me that you're taking this seriously, that you're praying, that you're seeking God's face, that you're willing to obey whatever He tells you to do. Because that's what this is all about. Not about me, not about these videos, not about whether I'm right or wrong. It's about whether you're willing to hear God's voice and respond in faith. The mountain overlook where I met with Jesus is still there. The coastal community is still there. The desert spring is still there. The mountain valley is still there. The redwood forest is still there. The lake in Minnesota is still there. The refuges are prepared. The communities are waiting. The question is, will you come, or will you wait until it's too late? 25 days. That's all the time you have. Make it count. It's now 6:47 a.m. on January 29th, 2026. The sun is rising over the valley below my house. In 25 days, that sun will rise on a different world, a world where everything has changed, a world where the comfortable illusions have been stripped away, a world where people will finally understand the difference between knowing about God and actually knowing God. I don't know what's going to happen to me after February 23rd. Jesus told me I'm supposed to stay visible, to keep delivering messages, to document what's happening, but I don't know what that's going to look like practically. I don't know if I'll still have electricity, internet, the ability to make videos. I don't know if I'll still be safe where I am, but I know this. I've delivered the message I was given. I've shared the 5 refuges. I've given the date. I've provided enough information that anyone who truly wants to find these places will be able to find them. The rest is up to you and up to God. May you have ears to hear. May you have eyes to see. May you have the faith to obey. And may you find yourself exactly where God wants you to be when February 23rd arrives. The clock is ticking. The refuges are waiting. The choice is yours.